Now, if you were to read a history book about the British Empire, you might expect it to begin maybe in the 16th century, when the great Elizabethan explorers Francis Drake and Walter Raleigh sailed to the New World. Or maybe the 17th century, when the first emigrants left these shores to found colonies in America and the West Indies. But this series is called Timelines, and we believe in taking the long view. We think nothing of traveling 1,000 years in a mere hour. And so I'm going on a journey that goes a lot further back than you might expect. I'm traveling west from Liverpool, along the coast of North Wales, and I'm heading back to a very distant century, the late 13th century, to the year 1282 to be exact. That was when an English king, Edward I, sent an army along this route I'm traveling now. He conquered Wales, he built castles as symbols of his power, and he shipped in English settlers to exploit this land. And the Welsh became second-class citizens in their own country. Now, obviously, what happened here can't really be considered a part of the British Empire story. These events took place 4 centuries before Britain even existed. England and Scotland were separate nations back then. But what I think is fascinating is that centuries before the spread of British influence across the globe, we, the English, were doing exactly the same within these islands. Our influence spread to Wales, to Ireland, to Scotland, and in this forging of the United Kingdom, we see patterns emerging that repeat themselves again and again in the empire story that follows. And so the story of England's empire begins with a king, Edward Longshanks, the first Norman king to see himself as English, to speak English in everyday conversation. But with this growth in national identity emerged a more ugly characteristic, English arrogance, the belief that we were better than everyone else. Woe betide those cultures on England's margins that failed to recognize our obvious superiority. Woe betide those like Llywelyn ap Gruffudd, the last prince of an independent Wales. Edward demanded his allegiance. When Llywelyn withheld that allegiance, Edward sent in his armies. And what followed was a textbook lesson in English imperialism, the transformation of Wales into a docile colony under the thumb of the English conqueror. All along the coastline of northwest Wales they stand, Edward's castles, proud symbols of English military might. Harlech, Carnarvon, Beaumaris, Conwy.
What interests me isn't so much the castles as the towns that surround them. These towns weren't for the Welsh, they were for the English. They were called boroughs, they were protected by a boundary wall, and they were populated by English men and women who'd been brought into Wales in a deliberate policy of introducing Englishness into a foreign land. We introduced English dress, English law, the English language.
The English who came here were given a license to squeeze the locals dry. The land was divided up, the rich lowland pasture for the English, the barren upper slopes for the Welsh. If any Welshman had goods to sell, they had to enter the borough, and the English charged a cut on everything bought and sold.
Now what I'm offering here is basically just a model of how empires sometimes work. And really you can sum it up in 4 words. Firstly, conquest. The fact that, yes, of course, behind every imperial adventure, there's the threat of force. Secondly, colonization, the movement of our people into distant lands. Thirdly, commerce, trade, the desire for profit. And fourthly, civilization, the belief that our way of life is better. When I look down there, I don't just see Wales. I see India, Africa, the West Indies. There in that castle is the history of the British Empire.